for another episode. I am Sweetcar. I got Shovit joining me today. Shishot is too busy saving lives. We have a lot of action to unpack. Week 13 is officially in the works. One more week, and then playoffs kick off in fantasy football for us. Shovit, how are you feeling?
I'm feeling pretty good. I am feeling great actually because as of this week, I am officially in the playoffs in our league. So
Nice.
it feels so good, man. Like so many late nights of waiver wire pickups, so many things, moving players around, and I lucked in with that with my running back situation, and I'm in now. So we'll see how it goes.
Yep. Once you're in, man, anything can happen. So
Exactly.
um, that's the name of the game. So that's awesome. You have one more week to hope that you can figure out your running back situation. Or your running back situation got a little bit more fluid with Fournette coming back this week, and I know Rashad White got some carries, but we'll see um,
Yeah.
if Lenny deserves a start in the playoffs alongside Najee Harris on your lineup. It's probably going to
We'll
be.
get to that. We'll get to that when we talk about that game, but I am not happy or excited about having to start Lenny moving forward. It's not going to be a good matchup for Lenny holders. So hopefully there's other options. Hopefully I can find someone in the waiver wire. There's some guys that came up this week that should deserve some attention.
Yeah, again, there's no more waivers to hold on to, right? Now you got to go
Right.
out and get the guys that are going to help you in the playoffs to win. So
Yeah.
we'll unpack all of that. Again, let's kick things off. Shove it with water cooler talk. Couple things to note real quick before we jump into the action. Ron Rivera has announced Carson Wentz is back and healthy, but he is officially going to be a backup. So he is still going to be backing up Taylor Heineke, who has done a good enough job, got the Commanders back into playoff contention. So it's nice to see that they're letting him run the show for the rest of the year, at least until he kind of screws things up, I'm sure. And then they'll probably revert back to Wentz because that's usually what teams with Carson Wentz do. They have this belief that Wentz has some sort of aura that that they can reclaim that magic from when he was once really good. So nice to see Heineke at least get the job after doing a good job there. Other quarterback news: Panthers released Baker Mayfield, and he officially got claimed by the LA Rams. Funny thing is, the Rams were the only team to put a claim in on him, so it doesn't sound like there was a lot of teams garnering for Baker Mayfield. We talked about, or the thought was the 49ers with their quarterbacks situation now, but they were like 24th or 25th in waiver claims out of the whole NFL. So I guess one, they didn't even put in a claim thinking they were going to get him, or two, they just quite frankly didn't want him. So Rams now get Baker Mayfield. That franchise, that team this year is just, just turn the calendar from last year where they were at this point to this year where they're at this point. I know the Rams bought basically their championship in a way because they traded all this stuff, but I don't think even the Rams organization thought
Right.
that they were going to regress this drastically from last year to this year. So I guess you pay the price, but at the end of the day, they have that Super Bowl trophy and they have that Super Bowl ring. So that's all that matters. The Pro Bowl games, we talked about it earlier in a couple of episodes prior. Now they have announced that Eli Manning and Peyton Manning, as if these guys aren't on TV enough nowadays, they are going to be coaching the Pro Bowl games, the NFC versus the AFC. Looks like, again, the Mannings are taking over the NFL. Maybe Madden, the video game, is going to be named Manning one day with how much they're trying to get these guys in the spotlight post-career. But looks like, again, these brothers are carving out a pretty nice role for themselves post-football with basically taking control of all things NFL. And lastly, we talk about it on every recap episode. We want to go ahead and recap after the action that transpired this week, what the current top 5 projected draft picks are going to be. Houston still holds the number 1 spot. That is unchanged. The Bears are at number 2. Seattle jumps up from number 4 to number 3 now. And Detroit down from number 3 to number 4 now. And Philly, who was 6th last week, jumps up to number 5, which is incredible considering that Philly now, this stage, is holding a top 5 draft pick next year and has the best record in the NFL this year. So it's probably a pretty good problem to have, a pretty good situation to be in if you're Philadelphia. Carolina is the team that drops out of the top 5. They were number 5 last week. But Philadelphia, because of New Orleans, it's New Orleans' pick. Because New Orleans lost, they are now getting a top 5 draft pick. So again, if you're an Eagles fan, this is like best case scenario, best of both worlds. So good for them. That's all I got for Water Cooler Talk, Shovit. Let's get into the action with the rundown. First game on the board, show it. Your Steelers against Atlanta visiting the Falcons, favored by 1 on the road, over under sitting at 42. They win this game 19-16 final, under 42 cashes. Pittsburgh covers the spread. Steelers are now 5-7. They're kind of getting there, man. They're kind of hovering. They're kind of getting to that 500 area that Tomlin likes to at least be at every season. So slowly but surely, I keep talking about Pittsburgh. If they're going to face teams that are, similar in competition, or even slightly better in competition, the coaching is always going to take the cake. And I think that's kind of what the X factor was here. It's a close matchup. The difference in this game was really just extending drives on third down. Pittsburgh was 6 of 12 on third down. The Atlanta Falcons only 3 for 10. Kenny Pickett had a nice day, 197 yards passing, 1 touchdown, did not throw an interception. Najee Harris ran the ball okay, 17 carries, 86 yards. The passing game was interesting, though. George Pickens, the guy we'd been talking about as kind of stepping up and being kind of an auto play, even though this passing game isn't that great. Only 1 catch for 2 yards on 2 targets. So if you started Pickens in such an intriguing matchup against Atlanta's pass defense, you were very, very disappointed. Pat Fryermuth had a nice day. He had a really long catch, and I expected him to have more because he had 3 for 76 in like the first half, it seemed like. And then he didn't catch a pass the rest of the game. But still, tight ends, if you got 3 catches for 76 yards from the tight end position, you're going to be okay with that. Deontay Johnson, reclaimed whatever Deontay Johnson claims, 5 catches, 60 yards. So just another day for Deontay Johnson, where it really
Also
doesn't
a drop.
matter. Yep. Oh, I mean, yeah, we should be able to. We should start putting drops in these stat lines. I feel like we
Yeah.
would be talking about drops a lot. But the Steelers defense, man, 1 sack, 1 interception, only 16 points allowed against Mariota in this offense. Mariota had 167 yards passing, 1 touchdown through the air. He did throw that interception. They held him in check running the football, only 3 carries for 17 yards. Cordero Patterson, 11 for 60 on the ground, and Algier, 10 for 52. We talked about the Pittsburgh pass defense being 32nd against opposing fantasy wide receivers. I know that was more so first half of the season. They've kind of gotten better. But Drake London, if somehow you decided to start him, 6 catches, 95 yards, that's a pretty decent day from their pass catchers. So I'd say overall, again, these are the type of games, in my opinion, that Pittsburgh is going to come out and win because, again, evenly matched or slightly, outmatched or slightly undermatched. The difference is going to be the X's and O's. And again, give me Mike Tomlin 10 out of 10 times against a lot of these other head coaches. Pittsburgh pulls this one away. They're 5-7. Can Tomlin get to that 500 that he needs to get to extend his streak of seasons staying at 500 or above? Do you think it'll happen?
I think so. I think just because it's Tomlin and there's still 5 more games left, right? So winning 3 out of those 5 games gets you above the or at 500 or better mark. So I like my chances with this team. I think that they're a balanced team. They're not explosive. They're not going to, put up a lot of points, but their defense is stepping up. And Fitzpatrick, he had the interception to end the game last week. And with TJ Watt back, they're a different team. So I like the chances here. The offense just still needs to be a little bit more explosive, score more than 19 points. I know that there are people that have Pickens on that probably started him that are mad, and he was mad too after only having 1 catch on 2 targets. He was furious, like, give me that freaking ball, like yelling on the sideline after, Deontay Johnson not only has a drop, but he also fumbled the ball as well. So it's like he needs to be fed definitely a lot more. But, when you can come out with the win, you come out with the win no matter how you do it. And that's just the Steelers' way of doing things.
Yeah, I mean, how do you feel as a Pittsburgh fan knowing that you just paid Deontay Johnson and it seems like, the one problem that Deontay Johnson had is dropping passes. That has not gotten better, but it almost seems like this year, because after he's received this contract, I don't know. It doesn't seem like he cares as much, which is really hard to quantify. But a guy that just got paid millions of dollars, the only thing that this guy's lacking in his game is just being sure-handed. And we don't know what goes on behind the scenes. He could be sitting there with the football machine and just catching 5,000 passes after every game, and maybe he's just a guy that this is what you're going to get. He's just not going to get better. But do you think he's trying to improve, or do you think he's just sitting pretty with this money that he's received?
No, I don't think he's that type of guy. He's like one of those leader guys he's going to be the guy that mentors Pickens in the long run. But it's like, it's also the game script, right? You have like, you're in that Godwin role, but you're not as good as Godwin, or you're not as more as only 5 to
You're
10
not
yards.
reliable.
You're not
It's just
reliable, right? Yeah,
when you're the
exactly.
Godman role, you're catching passes on third down. You're turning around like for 5. When you need 5 yards, you're getting 6. Stuff like that. And
Yeah.
usually Godwin role means you're going to the guy that you trust. In Deontay Johnson's hands, I mean, still can't be trusted. So, it's weird. I know it's everything, right? The running game, Kenny
Yeah,
Pickett's first season. There's a lot going on, but as the guy that's supposed to be the mentor, I mean, as Steelers fans for the future, do you want a guy that still can't convincingly catch the football on a consistent basis, being the mentor and coach for this receiver that looks explosive, that could be the receiver of the future? I don't know. Only time will tell, I guess. But nonetheless, Pittsburgh comes away victorious here. They're 5-7. Atlanta at 5-8, still not out of it in that weird, crazy ass division. Might have been closer had Tampa Tom not come
right.
from behind last night in the final seconds. But nonetheless, that division is still not over.
All right, that takes us to the next game, Packers at Chicago Bears. The final score here, 28-19. Packers do come up with a win on this game. Over under was at 43 and a half, and just looking at the calculation, I think what's that 47. So yeah, the over definitely hit. And Green Bay was favored by 4.5 points, so they do cover that spread. Moving on to fantasy. So Aaron Jones left the game at the end of the second quarter with a shin injury. So just something to look into if he did return in the fourth quarter. But if not, if he's out, then A.J. Dillon, he's going to be a sure starter if you haven't already been starting him. A.J. Dillon had a pretty good game this week. And Christian Watson, man, again, he gets a touchdown, 3 receptions, 48 yards, and 1 carry for that 46 rushing yard touchdown, which was, I mean, the guy, like, when he is free, he is fast and he can get into the end zone. I think he had 2 touchdowns. One was a passing touchdown where Aaron Rodgers kind of made something happen and threw it to Christian Watson, and who broke free from the defender and was able to get a touchdown there, and also a rushing touchdown. 2 touchdowns for him. Solid day for him. And I mentioned AJ Dillon, 18 carries, 93 yards, 1 touchdown. Also complemented that with 3 receptions and 26 receiving yards. So good day for those two guys. On the Bears side, Justin Fields, man, did that little shake and bake and ran it in for that one rushing touchdown. He didn't have a great passing game. He had, I think, he had 2 interceptions. So not great as far as efficiency goes in that sense. And David Montgomery finds a way to get into the touchdown, kind of saves his day as well. But yeah, the Bears came out really good and really explosive at the sort of the first 2 quarters, and then it was all Packers. I think interceptions and then that Claypool fumble definitely caused them to lose the game along with the missed field goals. So the Bears just kind of broke down there, didn't allow them to have a chance to win the game. So yeah, as of now, Aaron Rodgers still owns the Bears.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, like, it doesn't matter if Rodgers is 60 or Rodgers is coming into the game like 15 interceptions, 3 touchdowns. He sees Chicago on that schedule, and all of a sudden he turns back the clock. Man, he looked
Right.
good. It's the Aaron Jones thing is definitely something worth monitoring. It looked like it wasn't that serious because they kept like bringing him back, but he was being used a lot more seldomly than he was prior. And AJ Dillon took advantage of all of that and had a great game. So yeah, I mean, no matter the running back in this offense, you're obviously going to be happy starting them. It's just a matter of, you don't want half injured Aaron Jones taking carries away from fully healthy AJ Dillon. You'd rather see Aaron Jones be fully healthy and deploy him versus AJ Dillon. So definitely something to monitor as the week goes on. And the whole Fields thing, I had a really long conversation with Turner because Turner's a Bears fan, and so
Mhm.
he recently bought a Justin Fields jersey, and so he's not, he's just kind of getting into the NFL a little bit more so recently. So I've been talking to him a little bit about how Fields, dude, he looks amazing running the football, but there's still a lot to be desired from his passing standpoint, all this
Mhm.
stuff. And we were talking about rebuild and stuff. So, the future is definitely bright for Chicago. I just still think, you can see the lack of mechanics in, very, very like, you know, NFL caliber, like throws that are supposed to be routine, right? Routine NFL throws for quarterbacks still don't seem comfortable for Justin Fields. He still has a big arm, so he's going to get the ball downfield and throw some bombs, and that's going to look pretty. But again, moving those chains, moving the sticks, yes, he can do it with his legs. And I think that automatically is going to make him a threat as long as he just, figures out how to be even an average passer, right? The threat with your legs are already going to be something the defense has to account for. So all you have to do is be average passing the football. The interceptions didn't look great, but again, at the end of the day, there were a lot of things that caused the Bears to lose this game. Claypool, man, that dude just pisses me off. He gets an opportunity, fumbles the football down the stretch in crunch time. So, the Bears, again, Does it not seem like the Bears are just playing just enough good football to be like, all right, Justin Fields is a future, but then also losing every game to be like, all right, we're still going to get that top draft pick. So it's almost like if you're a Bears fan, this is the perfect storm for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're hoping more from Claypool, but Darnell Mooney's out. So their receiving core is not looking very pretty to help Justin Fields get into that rhythm that he needs to be. So yeah, keep doing your thing, Justin Fields. Get me my hopefully my uh what's it called, fantasy win in the playoffs. But on to next season for the Bears.
Yeah, fantasy wise, Fields automatic start. Again,
Yeah.
you're just talking from like a quarterback of the future for the Bears. Still needs to shore up the passing, but again, same thing to Hurts, right? Hurts had an amazing running his second year, and you were like, okay, well, he needs to take the next step as a passer, and this year he's been unreal. So it's not like it can't happen with Fields either.
Yeah. And they do have AJ Brown, so that helps.
Yeah, they do. So maybe the Bears will trade for a superstar. The Detroit Lions, the other team in this division in the NFC North, were hosting the Jacksonville Jaguars. Weird week the NFL is, man. Jacksonville on the road this game in Detroit, favored by 1 point. Final score 40-14. The Lions blow the Jags out of the building. Detroit underdog by 1 point, win the game outright, over 51.5 cashes. Detroit also now sitting at 5-7. They are second place in the NFC North. The Jags have dropped to 4-8. I mean, this was just an absolute annihilation. Jared Goff, 340 through the air, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Now is finally the weeks where you start DeAndre Swift over Jamal Williams. I still think you could probably start both of them with the way they use them, but this was the first week leading up to this week where you felt confident starting Swift over Williams based on everything. Injuries, he's finally looking like himself again. Swift 14 for 62 on the ground, found the end zone, 4 catches and 49 yards through the air. Jamal Williams complemented that with 11 catches, 35 yards and a rushing touchdown as well. So again, if you have both of those guys, if you have either one of those guys right now, Detroit's defense is not great. Their offense is kind of clicking. So you're feeling comfortable starting both of those guys. But again, if you have to pick one, finally, you probably feel a little bit better starting Swift over Williams. And that time, was not here until this past week for those listening. Amon-Ra St. Brown, the other guy, dude, he is an absolute monster. 11 catches, 114 yards, 2 touchdowns through the air. Just get the man the football. That's all he needs to do. He doesn't drop passes. He's always open. He's everything you want in a receiver. On the other side, Trevor Lawrence, 179 through the air, 1 touchdown, ran the ball 4 times for 32 yards. But this Jags team had so many opportunities to climb back in this game, but every time they got the ball back and they had an opportunity to come back, it was like a 3 and out. It was a turnover. It was really bad, really poor performance on their end. ETN, 13 carries, 54 yards, 3 catches for 12 yards. Christian Kirk had a nice day if you started him, 6 catches, 104 yards. And Evan Ingram, man, the revolving door of tight ends. 1 week he does nothing. This week, 5 catches, 30 yards and a touchdown. So, I mean, the reason the Jags could not get back into this game, Shovit, the Lions, 8 for 12 on third down. The Lions, 0 turnovers. The Lions, 37 minutes of time of possession, only 1 penalty in all 37 of those minutes. And when they were in the red zone 4 times, they scored all 4 times. So, I mean, that's about a completed performance as you've seen from the Detroit Lions probably in like the last 5 years. So they checked off every single box. Everybody played well. They all did their jobs. And maybe that's why Vegas is already drinking their Kool-Aid and has them as 2.5-point favorites against the Minnesota Vikings this upcoming week, which again, I could go off on a tangent about, but we'll save that for the preview episode. Lions take this one. They're 5-7. They're still not technically out of the playoffs or technically, I guess, even the division. If the Vikings lose out and the Lions win out, there's still a possibility there with 5 games left. But Detroit playing some nice football.
Awesome. Perfect segue as we talked about the Vikings just now. The next game is the New York Jets traveling to Minneapolis against the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings were favored by 3 points. Over under was 44.5, and the final score was 22-27. So that over did hit, and Minnesota covered the spread. So fantasy wise, Jets, Garrett Wilson, man, he's looking like a solid guy to start on your lineups. 8 receptions, 162 yards, just a complete player with Mike White on as a quarterback on that team. And then the question was who's going to be the RB1 last week, and Zonovan Knight was going to be the guy that we all talked about. And sure enough, 90 yards on 15 carries. He also had 5 passes for 28 yards. And then Ty Johnson was only there kind of on passing downs if anything. And he still ended up finishing with 7 points this week. But yeah, moving forward, Zonovan Knight all the way 100%. And then Greg Zuerlein, it seemed like the Jets were getting to the red zone and not being able to capitalize. So it was like Zuerlein season, like field goals after field goals after field goals. I think he had like what four or five field goals to
Five
end
field goals, I think. Yeah.
five field goals to end the game. I mean, and some of them were more than 30 yards, 40 yarders. So solid stats for him and fancy points for him. And on the Viking side, Dalvin Cook, 20 carries, 86 yards, 1 touchdown. He had some nice little explosive runs that allowed you guys to move the chains there. 2 receptions for -3 yards, but that's a positive and half point PPR.
PPR.
PPR, yeah. So that's something to note there. And then Thielen, I have on my notes here. He had 2 catches for 2 catches on 6 targets for 27 yards. And whether or not you drop him, I don't think you drop him because you guys are playing the Lions next week. So if he's not able to do anything against the Lions, then I guess Thielen might be a guy that you're like, okay, I'm gonna scratch this guy. Like, there's no way he's out of my team after that. But until then, I think Thielen still stays on your team. But the game script, man, I think the Vikings in the first 2 quarters, I think they did really well scoring points. Justin Jefferson getting touchdowns, and Thielen, Dalvin Cook getting touchdown. It was looking really good, and then the Jets defense kind of kept him in the game all throughout the second half, and they had so many chances. The Jets did to be able to win this game. I mean, the drive before the last drive for the Jets, they were in the red zone, try to get a sneak in with Mike White, I believe, and they weren't able to convert on that. And then the last drive, you're there and you get a pick, you throw an interception with some minute left in the game or something like that. So just chances. There were chances to capitalize and they just didn't. And the Vikings came out on top. It's crazy that Jets ran 85 plays in this game and they averaged around like 60 to 50 to 60 points. So they, like I said, they had the opportunity, they just weren't able to capitalize. And kudos to the Vikings defense for coming up big at the end to allow them to win this game. Minnesota goes on to 10-2. Jets are now 7-5 in the year.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about the Vikings all the time, being Vikings fans, and me and Shishot, but the Vikings continue to be the definition of bend don't break, right? I mean, the Jets may not have punted one time this game. I don't even know if the Jets had a single punt, but they had 5 drives that ended in field goals, right? I mean, 5 possessions ending in 15 points. I mean, that's a little over 2 touchdowns, which isn't terrible considering the fact that you trust your offense a little bit. And then there was one time on fourth down where they stopped him on fourth down. And then the other time, the Mike White sneak, they had stopped him, but then they reviewed it and he was over the plane. So, this defense, when push comes to shove, and then the last possession, interception, right at the goal line. So whenever their backs are against the wall, they somehow seem to step up, but that's really, really playing with fire, right? I mean, you can't expect that type of outcome every single football game, which the Vikings have been lucky enough to have that just about every single football game. But, the realisticness is going to have to come back at some point where, there's going to be a team that's not going to make those mistakes once they get into the red zone. The teams with amazing red zone offenses. And at that point, I think we're going to give in, kind of like the Dallas game. So there's still a lot of concern as a Vikings fan, just from a defensive standpoint, where, I saw a stat that has net yards per play, which basically takes your offensive yards per play you have, and then the defensive yards per play you allow. And the Vikings are like 28th in the league at like negative 0.8 yards, right? And the only teams worse are like Houston, Pittsburgh, and like some other teams that are basically not doing much on offense and not really doing much on defense either. So, they're the biggest outlier because at 10-2, having basically negative net yards per play, it's just not reasonable that this is going to be sustainable. So that's my fear. But again, the NFL is weird. They could just continue to do this every week, and they would be the anomaly to all of the stats and everything that we talk about for years to come. But you never want to bank on that. But at
Right.
10-2, it's hard for me to really argue with the results comparative to how we're getting there, I guess. But I'm not going to complain at 10-2. Absolutely not.
No, I think, and the defense played really good too. The first play of the game was an interception by Harrison Smith,
Yep.
right? So I mean, there's a lot of things that, like you said, bend don't break. You got to come out with a win, and a lot of teams, because of coaching or because of whatever, they're not able to capitalize when it's like a close game, and the Vikings are doing that, so that's a good sign. And just keep feeding JJ, and they'll be all right.
Yeah, exactly. Give the ball to JJ. Next game on the board, the Commanders and Giants NFC East showdown. This division has everybody in the playoffs heading into this week. Giants at home, underdogs 2.5 points. Over under was 40.5. And man, this game had the making of everything, right? The Giants cover the 2.5 point dog spread, and under 40.5 cashes shove it with the game that was 20-20 going into overtime. Do you think any bettors that had the under heading into overtime at 20-20 were like, oh, we still have a chance? No, you were absolutely like, screw this, we're screwed. Someone's going to kick a field goal. This game's over. But no, if you held a under 40.5 ticket, you probably should go out and buy some winning lottery tickets, because that is an incredible hit. The game ties as if the East needed any other complications. They now have two teams that are tied. Washington 7-5-1. The Giants 7-4-1. So I don't know how that tie is going to factor into the equation. From a standing standpoint, though, Washington, because they tied, they actually are no longer the 7th seed. They have been trumped by the Seattle Seahawks. So Washington has officially fallen off the playoff list because of the tie. Heineke had a great game, though. 275 through the air, 2 touchdowns, didn't throw an interception. I mean, that could have arguably been his best game as a pro. Brian Robinson continues to get volume, man. 21 carries, 96 yards, 2 catches for 15 yards. Antonio Gibson, this was a game where Antonio Gibson didn't do as well as he usually does. 9 for 39 on the ground, only 2 catches for 20 yards. And weird game. All of the pass catchers on the Commanders had a great fantasy day. So Terry McLaurin, we already know Heineke loves him. He's a start, 8 for 105 and a touchdown. Dotson, who had a really nice start to the season, got hurt, came back, 5 for 54 and a touchdown. So good game for him. And Curtis Samuel, even only 6 catches for 63 yards, but also ran it 3 times for 23 yards. So, desperate 12-man, 14-man, daily fantasy league, random flyer. You could have thrown any one of those 3 guys in there and they would have produced for you. So that's a pretty nice day if you're on the Washington side. On the Giants side, Daniel Jones, 200 yards throwing, 1 touchdown, no interceptions, still fantasy relevant, 12 carries, 71 yards. So you love to see that from your quarterback. Saquon, 18 for 63 and a touchdown on the ground, 5 catches for 18 yards through the air. And the only pass catcher that's worth mentioning for the Giants, Darius Slayton, 6 catches, 90 yards. He continues to be the one, if you want to even call it consistent, half-ass consistent receiver on the Giants side that you can trust if you're really, really desperate and going to start somebody. But again, this division has been wild. They've had all these teams be good. The Commanders came out of nowhere, winners of like 4 in a row, and now these 2 teams tie. So it's only going to make the end of the season and the rest of this year that much crazier and that much more chaotic, because now these guys are going to be jockeying for playoff positioning with a tie on their record. So just, get your popcorn ready for the NFC East as the final 5 weeks roll around.
That's wild. Right below Washington is the Lions. So if the Lions start winning, Washington is no longer in there. Seahawks get kicked out, and then Lions could definitely make the playoffs then.
Vegas thinks they're winning next week for sure. So
that's crazy. That's crazy. All right, that takes us to the next game, Tennessee Titans at Philadelphia Eagles. Philadelphia was favored by 5 points, over-under is 44.5, and the final score, 10-35. It's crazy how well Vegas knows this stuff, dude. 44.5, the final score is
45 total points.
What is the algorithm that they're running? Like, I need
I don't know.
Need to get my hands on that. Fantasy wise, on the Titans side, you want to monitor Treylon Burks. He was ruled out due to concussion. He had that 25-yard touchdown, got hit really hard in the head, and then he was pretty much done for the rest of the game. So if you were going to start any receiver from the Titans, he was going to be the guy. If he's not there, just don't even worry about that. And another guy to kind of just look into, tight end, Chigozie Okonkwo. I hope I got that right. 68 receiving yards. So he's seeing an increasing percentage of offensive snaps, which is a good trend. And when tight end is slim and it's hard to find a tight end depth in the fantasy world, just something to look into. Derrick Henry
and the Titans. The Titans are desperate for people that can catch the football too, right? So I think if they're going to see any glimmer from somebody, they're like, oh, this guy's got something. We got to start trying to feed him the ball. So yeah, there's definitely more than just something to watch out for this tight end, because if Burks is out with the concussion, you're back to basically no receivers, or you're back to basically just Robert Woods and Westbrook Akine, and that makes the tight end a lot more intriguing for sure.
Absolutely. And then Derrick Henry, 11 attempts, 30 yards, 2.7 average, and had 2 receptions to kind of complement that. But this is his 3rd game with 3 or below average of running the ball, and he's just not getting that, extra push. And part of it also is because of they're facing the Philadelphia Eagles, who just put up so many points. Yes, the Eagles defense is a rush defense is not good, but when they put up 21 points in the first half, your game script changes 21-10, and you're just going to have to try to air it out to be able to keep up with the Eagles. And that's kind of what happened as far as why Derrick Henry was not successful, only 11 carries.
And that's
Um,
and the thing is, like, when you are a run first team and the Eagles run defense is so bad, there's still a formula, to be able to be better at stopping the run, right? It's just going to leave them susceptible to the pass, but rather than having 7 guys in the box, you have 8. Rather than having 8, you now stack the box with 9 of your 11 defenders. And so that's why Derrick Henry's going to have no space to run, and that's why they're going to dare Tannehill to beat you, and it's just
right.
not going to happen because he's throwing the ball to Okonkwo.
Yeah.
Like, he's throwing the ball to Okonkwo, like, how are the passing game going to beat the Eagles? It's just not. So,
Yeah.
even if the Eagles run defense is so bad right now, nobody can stop their offense, that they can continue to put up points and then just dare the weakness of the other team to exploit them. So they're still in a good situation.
Yeah, and then whenever you have you're playing the run, their defensive line can get to the quarterback really well, and
Yeah.
Tannehill was sacked multiple times and was pressured, and so that also did not help the Titans either. But on the Eagles side, fantasy wise, man, it was a great day for AJ Browners and Devontae Smithers and Jalen Hurters and Miles Sanders. I don't know if that's a thing, but I just made
You
that
could
as a joke.
start the entire Eagles offense and be
Yeah,
amazing.
absolutely. AJ Brown, 8 receptions, 119 yards, 2 touchdowns, had sick double
Dude.
moves, two
That
double
double
moves.
Dude, yeah, he got screwed.
Yeah,
How awesome is it that, like, you get that double move, you score a touchdown, they call a penalty, and then the very next play, like, dude, that's the kind of stuff that I love. I think that's the kind of stuff that, like, when you have a coach like Sirianni, when you have, like, the camaraderie like this team does, it's like, hey,
mhm,
man, you just got a bogus touchdown, get called back. We're gonna give the ball right back to you. And they
right.
gave the ball right back to him, and he scored a touchdown, man. That's unbelievable. That's some next level team chemistry.
AJ Brown, he's so shifty. He's so freaking good, and it helps
He's
with
good.
that they also have Devontae Smith, who had 5 receptions, 102 yards, 1 touchdown. Jalen Hurts, along with those 3 touchdowns, passing touchdowns, he also gets 1 rushing touchdown, and Miles Sanders finds a way to get into the end zone late in the game to put them up 35-10. But yeah, the game script basically, the Eagles had no answer. Tannehill had no protection, and the Eagles just put up points on this Titans defense, and there was just no coming back for the Titans. Philadelphia is now at top of the NFC with 11-1 record, and Tennessee goes down to 7-5.
God, dude, I'm still looking for that second Philly loss right now, and just the way they play,
Yeah,
it's scary, man. It's so scary. Like, we talked about this run offense, and then they're like, "Oh, okay, so you don't want us to run the football," and then you see Jalen Hurts throwing dimes to Brown and Smith, and you're just like, "God, bro, like, this team is so complete, and their defense is actually not bad. Their run defense was bad for like 4 or 5 weeks. They brought in Linval Joseph and Dominican Sue. They're going to get Jordan Davis back. They still have the corners. So, like, when healthy, this team is about as complete a football team in the NFL. So, I'm very, very scared if I'm basically a fan of any other team that's going to be in the playoffs against Philly.
absolutely. Looking at their schedule, the only game, I mean, there's the Giants that they played twice, and then there's the Cowboys on Christmas Eve. So
That's a good one.
that could
That's
be
going to be a
fun.
good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's really going to show how close that division is or how far apart that division is, right? I mean, the Cowboys should be able to be in that game just with their pass rush and with their ability to, run the football and everything like that. But I don't know, man. Philly is explosive and scary, and right now, give me Hurts over Dak 10 out of 10 times. Going from it's talking about a team that does so well offensively to a game where basically offense was such a nightmare. The Broncos, that's the theme. Anytime I talk about nightmare offenses, it's always the Denver Broncos. The Denver Broncos were traveling to Baltimore to take on the Ravens. Broncos were 8.5 point underdogs in this game, over under 39.5. I said it last week, hammer the under. Final score 10-9 final. Ravens win this game by 1. Denver, for consolation prizes, they cover the spread. They're now 3-9. Baltimore is 8-4. The story here is really Lamar. Lamar is hurt. Tyler Huntley came into this game. And if you know anything about Tyler Huntley, you know that he was there last year when Lamar got hurt, and surprisingly, he played pretty well. Well, it did not lead to wins, but fantasy wise, for like Andrews and the other guys, they didn't skip a beat. In fact, their fantasy production actually upticked when Huntley was in the lineup. So that's definitely something to monitor. I think Lamar, they said his injury is expected to be 1 to 3 weeks, but we'll see. Huntley 187 through the air, didn't throw a touchdown and threw an interception, but again, he has legs, 10 for 41 on the ground and a touchdown. Running backs were nightmarish. Drake 7 for 29, Edwards 6 for 12. So pick your poison there. Mark Andrews has 4 catches for 53 yards. Robinson and Duvernay do some random things that are not worth mentioning or even just talking about from a fantasy perspective. And, this is the scenario that Shoshota and I talked about when you have a guy like Justin Tucker. He's an auto start. You got to start him. You can't bench him. He didn't have a great game because the Ravens offense couldn't even get to field goal range. So these are the weeks against a really, really tough Denver Broncos defense where you really have to consider benching Tucker, even though you might not like it. So, it was a shit game from Baltimore. Really not much fantasy implications on the Denver side. I mean, if you really want me to go into it, I will, but it's pretty much just rinse and repeat. Russell Wilson, a whopping 189 yards passing, no touchdowns, no interceptions, ran the ball twice for 21 yards. Latavius Murray, 17 carries. The volume's there, 47 yards rushing, caught 4 passes for 14 yards. So that's nice to see. Cortland Sutton got hurt, so now it's the other receiver's turn. Jerry Jeudy's back, Sutton's hurt. They just keep flip-flopping. Jeudy 4 for 65. And if you needed another reason to understand that nothing with the Denver offense is correct and you should not start anybody, Greg Dulcich had 3 amazing weeks, and then a lot of us picked him up and started him for about 3 weeks straight. And for 3 weeks straight, he played like absolute trash. Last week, we were like, you know what? F this. Do not even entertain the idea of starting Dulcich. What does he do? 6 catches for 85 yards. This was a week where K. Dotton last night was tight end 1 with like 14 fantasy points. So Dulcich's fantasy points might put him in like the top 3 or 5 this week. So you would have gladly taken that. But he had 3 of the shittiest performances you could possibly imagine the last 3 weeks. Why on God's name would you have started him this week? You wouldn't have. But if you did, because you're dumb, 6 for 85. So sometimes fantasy just doesn't make any sense. Honestly, stay away from the Denver Broncos offense because they're just going to disappoint. Anytime you think one guy's going to go off, another guy's going to go off, the one constant, the one thing you know for sure, Russell Wilson is never going off again. So Ravens win this game 10-9 final. It was ugly. Monitor the Lamar injury because that's going to have fantasy implications for not just Lamar, but a lot of other players on that Ravens team. Ravens are now 8-4 after they win this one.
Yeah, Huntley's good. I like Tyler Huntley.
I like him, man.
Yeah.
He's a guy that like the 49ers or like other teams I feel like that were looking for quarterbacks after just the way he played last year should have not. I mean, 49ers not after last year because they had Lance and everything, but like hindsight, after the way he played last year, teams that were desperate for quarterbacks this year, I thought for sure we're going to start offering trades to the Ravens for him, but they didn't. And now again, Baltimore at least has him as a backup so that he can be serviceable while they get Lamar healthy.
Yeah. All right, that takes us to the next game. Cleveland Browns at Houston Texans. Cleveland was favored by 7 points. They covered that spread, and over/under was at 47. The under hit with the final score 27-14. This was the homecoming, the debut of Deshaun Watson, which we'll get into in a little bit here. Fantasy wise, let's start with that. Cleveland's defensive special teams. Donovan Peoples-Jones gets a punt return touchdown. They get a fumble return for a touchdown. They get a pick six on a deflection. So it was just an amazing game for the Cleveland defense. Amari Cooper, 4 catches on 9 targets, 40 yards. Not the best, but I like the 9 catches, 9 targets. I think that that plays a lot into Deshaun Watson as far as not producing as much. But Nick Chubb, 17 carries, 80 yards. He doesn't get into the end zone, so doesn't get a good enough fantasy points fantasy week, but had 17 carries for 80 yards. So, take what you want with that. Houston, Nico Collins, 3 receptions on 11 targets, 35 yards, and had a touchdown during garbage time. So Nico Collins is a guy that you might want to go out and, well, he's probably already on your team. He's probably not in free agency, but 3 of Houston's next opponents are in the top 10 in allowing fantasy points to receivers. So with this whole Brandon Cooks situation where he doesn't really want to be on the team, Nico Collins might be a guy you start because of garbage points and 11 targets.
Volume, and yeah, there's nobody else and they're going to be down. Yeah, absolutely. Game script. Basically, he's like the prototypical game script guy. They're just going to be
Right.
losing and have to throw the football.
Right. You're not happy to start him, but
No.
you just do it
You
because
could
you
do worse. You could do
yeah,
worse.
absolutely,
You could have
absolutely.
started Pickens.
Oh, that's true. One reception over 11, two targets over 11 targets. I take 11
Yeah.
targets. Um, Damian Pierce finally 18 carries, 73 yards, three receptions for 22 yards. So those are going to be better stats than he's had in the last two games. So you got to like that from Damian Pierce owners. But yeah, the game script was this: the Cleveland Browns didn't score a single touchdown on offense, and part of it was because Deshaun Watson looked like he hadn't played football in the last like 900 days. Like he just looked rusty, and it's probably like just because he's the first came back. But I think that that's also the reason why Cooper didn't have as many catches, because some of the throws were off target. So
So bad.
Deshaun Watson, they were pretty bad. They're pretty bad. Their defense carried them to a victory here. But it's I almost kind of expected this from Deshaun Watson, but I think that there's still hope moving forward that he kind of gets things figured out. But he may be in another Russell Wilson situation just for this year, so something to kind of look into. And I don't think he's a must start at anytime soon.
Yeah, I agree. And I think for me, I thought it was going to be more so, yes, he was going to look rusty, but rusty can mean like a couple of different things, right? I didn't expect a perennial franchise quarterback who sat out for whatever by definition of rusty, like he's a quarterback by design. This guy that's his career for
Mhm.
as long as he can make it, right? So even though he's suspended, I would have figured this dude was at least throwing footballs on football fields somewhere. But like a lot of his throws, like just straight into the ground, like his accuracy was so bad. I mean, it really looked like for 900 days, not only had he not played like football, but he hadn't even picked up a football or thrown a football, is kind of what it looked like to me. And I'm like, man, some of these throws are like, this is a college quarterback that has no business being in the NFL type shit. So it looked bad. And yeah, you're definitely not going to start him at all based on what you saw last week. But we already know what Deshaun Watson can be. It's not like age is the issue or anything like that, right? So for him to regain that form is not out of the realm of possibility. In fact, it's probably more possible that it's going to eventually happen. So I think, in 3 weeks, could Watson be putting up 18 to 20 fantasy points? Absolutely. Are you going to risk that in like the fantasy championships? Maybe not, but anything can happen between now and then. Your star quarterback, Patrick Mahomes, leading you to the promised land, could get hurt, and then you might have to pivot. So it is a possibility. Don't drop him. If you picked him up, still keep him on your bench. But yeah, I mean, that was about as bad a quarterback performance
Yeah.
as I would have expected. And it wasn't, again, for me, it wasn't like he looks rusty. I was like, man, he just looks bad. Like he looked flat out bad. And last thing, I think
Mhm.
the pressure was getting to him, right? It wasn't like a random game that he was coming back from. He was going back to Houston, all the storylines, obviously, like, the negative aura around all the shit that he did, like that probably can't feel good. He's getting booed. He's seeing signs, like all that matters. And I think that really kind of got to him. And playing in Houston, I think the pressure played a pretty big factor in how bad some of those throws were. Because again, not rusty, not any. It was just like plain bad. So I think the pressure had a lot to do with it. So I'm with you. I'm definitely not starting him anytime soon. I know we're approaching fantasy playoffs, so it's a very very big risk, but the potential is still tremendous that he could explode in any given week. So you still want to stash him on your bench for the last 3-4 weeks of fantasy.
See, if I like, I'm not Deshaun Watson, and I would never do the things he did, but he just got paid like so much money, like
Yeah,
guaranteed money, right?
so
And
much
he's
money.
getting
Yeah.
booed in Houston, and no one in the public's eyes, like Deshaun Watson is a terrible person of all the stuff that he
Yeah.
did, and rightfully so. Like that's it's bad. If I was him, I wouldn't even play football anymore. Like I would just ride
Same.
to the sunset. Like I have made so much money. All that money's coming to me. Like why would you want to put yourself in the press conference and all these situations of like having the public look at you in a certain way? If I was him, I'd just forget it. Like I'll play
Just hang
bad
it
and
up, man. Take your millions and just do something else. I don't know. Like he could go around and have like he could go on like a revenge tour, a redeem tour, if you will, like where he just goes around and just basically talks about how he fucked up, and like that would mean so much more to people than like him coming
right.
back on the football field and leading the Browns to a change. Like if the city of Cleveland, here's a crazy scenario. If Deshaun Watson takes the city of Cleveland to the Super Bowl and wins them the Super Bowl, how how are the Browns fans who currently despise Watson, just hate him because he's a horrible human being, all that, which I agree with, but there's also people that are like, whatever, like you can be on whatever, I don't care. But how are the people that despise him right now going to feel if somehow he leads the Browns to the Super Bowl? Like, is it going to be as fulfilling as they anticipated a Browns Super Bowl to be? Is it going to be tarnished? Like it just seems like there's no like winning at the end of this tunnel. Like he could take them to the promised land and win it all, but you're still gonna be like, my God, this franchise picked up, traded for Deshaun Watson, knowing all the allegations that he had, paid
Yeah.
him like millions of guaranteed money. And we had to root for him. So I don't know. You're right. If I'm Deshaun Watson, obviously I'm not. And obviously there's like a competitive side to it, right? So he's like, I want to prove people wrong. Like I want to play football my whole life, blah, blah, blah. I want to win a Super Bowl. But you're right. Like the negative press and then all the negativity that's going to come with all this is just not worth it for him to continue to be on the football field. And I know we're jumping the gun because of how bad he looked and it was 1 week. Maybe he'll just kick ass next week and it's just like, okay, fine, whatever. He's good.
Right.
Like just keep playing. But I'm with you. It is a weird act to balance if you're a Cleveland Browns fan, in my opinion. Another divisional matchup, the Seattle Seahawks against the Los Angeles Rams. Rams at home, underdogs by 7 points, cover the spread, but they do lose the game. 27-23 final. This game closer than I expected, over 41 cashes. Seattle now 7-5. The Rams, might as well call them the Lambs. The Lambs dropped to 3-9. Geno Smith continues to prove the naysayers wrong. 367 yards passing. When the hell are you ever going to see Russell Wilson throw for 300 yards again? It probably will never happen. 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. Storyline here, injury-wise, Kenneth Walker III did leave the game. He is hurt. His status is in question for next week. They did say it's not as serious as they expected, so there is a chance he could literally be ready to play this week. But if not, Travis Homer also hurt. DJ Dallas also a little wobbly. So there's they had, I think, signed Wayne Gallman from their practice squad or elevated him from the practice squad. So the running back situation there is definitely something to monitor for people that are heading to the playoffs, people that are fighting for that last spot. This is, again, you're basically your last waiver week before playoffs where, your waiver order doesn't matter. Just go out and pick up as many people as you think you need for your playoff roster. And right now, if you need a win next week, you're probably going out and trying to figure out which of these Seattle Seahawks running backs that obviously isn't Ken Walker because he's rostered that you're going to pick up. So definitely something to monitor as the week progresses. The receivers, man, I was so low on these receivers this year because of the whole Geno Smith situation. And not only has Geno Smith proved us wrong, but the results of Geno Smith had led to me being wrong about DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. I mean, Lockett 9 for 128 and a touchdown, DK 8 for 127 and a touchdown. I mean, those are ridiculous numbers. Noah Fant even got in the action, 4 for 42 and a touchdown. The problem with Seattle and the reason why this game was so close is they can't stop the run. I mean, you had John Wolford starting, who threw for 178 yards, no touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. If I just read you that stat line by the quarterback of the Rams, would you have guessed the final score was 27-23? Absolutely not. But that's because the Rams as a whole ran the ball 33 times for 171 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns, led by, holy crap, this guy deserves a movie for his story arc. Cam Akers resurged. He went from being like the starter to everybody hating him, to them being like, we're going to trade you, to them not finding trade suitors, to now all of a sudden, full circle, he's the starter, 17 carries, 60 yards, and 2 touchdowns. You would gladly take that. So that is fantastic. If Cam Akers is not picked up, which, again, a lot of leagues dropped his ass, so he could be out there, go pick this guy up because they have nobody else. And at least you're getting a starting running back. Even though he's a starting running back, it doesn't mean you start him every week blindly here, like week in and week out moving forward. But he's a starting running back, and you keep him on your roster, you take him away from somebody else forcing themselves to start him, and he gets lucky and does well. So that's another kind of, I guess, what's that called? Strategy that you can deploy. And then for the Rams receivers, nobody. There's nobody on the receiving core that's worth picking up. Van Jefferson, no. Skoranek, no. Higbee, maybe, but no. So until there's a quarterback at the helm that is trustworthy, which, we already talked about at the beginning of the show. Their quarterback is Baker Mayfield, and they said he could play as early as I don't know if they're not playing Thursday night, are they? I think they might be playing Thursday night. He could play as early as this Thursday. I wouldn't hold out hope for that just because, again, playbook, you got to learn the playbook, and it's been 2 days. So how much of it can you really learn? But Wolford also came up on the injury report, so maybe they're desperate. Maybe they really have no other options, and the Rams have nothing to lose. They can just keep losing, and it really doesn't matter for them anymore. So I don't know if Baker Mayfield makes any of the receivers viable. I really don't think so. I mean, he didn't make DJ Moore viable. He didn't really make, Amari Cooper viable. So I just don't trust that he's going to turn Van Jefferson or Ben Skoranek into viable fantasy starters. So at this point, you're banking on Akers on this offense and nobody else. And then on the Seattle side, obviously, again, Geno, Walker, Lockett, DK, you name it, man. This offense is just clicking. Seattle wins this game a little bit closer than I expected, and now they're 7-5.
Just a wild, wild season. Cam Akers,
Dude,
man.
amazing to be able to cover it on a podcast.
All right, next up, Miami Dolphins at the San Francisco 49ers. The final score was 17-33. The 49ers come up with a win in this one. They're favored by 4 points. They cover that spread. The over hits with 46 and a half. So let's start with injuries. Jimmy G, season-ending foot injury. So that's sad to see for the 49ers, who were really clicking. They lose Trey Lance. Jimmy G comes in. They're having a great season, but now he's out. So Brock Purdy, remember we talked about Brock Purdy,
Mr. Irrelevant.
Mr.
He was the
Irrelevant.
last pick of the draft.
Yeah, last pick of the draft, and he didn't play too bad. He didn't play that bad.
No.
And so he comes in. He's probably going to get the start for the rest of the season. And then Tua Tagovailoa also had an ankle injury at the end of the game, just something to monitor. A Waddle left at the start of the third quarter with a leg injury. So if he is out next week, then Sherfield becomes a serious starter for your team. So fantasy wise, Tua had 2 touchdowns, but he also had 2 interceptions and a fumble that kind of didn't help his points there, but the 2 touchdowns definitely helps. Tyreek Hill was all over the field, 9 receptions, 146 yards, one touchdown. Not a whole lot of waddles, so all Tyreek Hill in this game. Mostert surprisingly outcarries Jeff Wilson 7-1 times, and that's not like 7 times to 1. It's like literally 7 times for Mostert, and then 1 time for Jeff Wilson. So not a lot of running the ball, but it's just something to note. Miami plays Chargers next week, who've allowed the second most fantasy points of running backs. So we really need to figure out who's going to be the guy. Is it going to be Raheem Mostert or is it going to be Jeff Wilson? Because that could definitely play a role for starters next week. On the 49ers side, CMC, Christian McCaffrey, 17 carries, 66 yards, 8 receptions, 80 receiving yards, and a touchdown. Had a solid game. And, Elijah Mitchell was on the IR, and then Brock Purdy comes in. So, more Christian McCaffrey in the lineup definitely helps. And then Deebo Samuel, 6 receptions on 10 targets, 58 yards, had a good game. I think that's also due to the Brock Purdy effect, we'll call it, having a rookie quarterback. Ayuk, 5 receptions on 9 targets and 46 yards. So I think that moving forward, the 2 guys that will benefit the most out of this is going to be CMC and Deebo Samuel. They're the studs in the team. And Brock Purdy, I could see him doing a lot more checkdowns to CMC, just to kind of, he holds the ball a little bit longer than Garoppolo. I could see him getting the CMC more often, get him incorporated. And then Deebo Samuel, he's that Swiss Army knife. So I think that he's going to be a comfortable start for you moving forward. Ayuk, I don't really know what to make of him. He's been having a solid season so far, getting touchdowns. Not really, you're not seeing the targets, you're seeing more production touchdown wise. So that tread lightly with Ayuk on your team. But yeah, I think that this game was 49ers just basically dominated this game in terms of time of possession. They kept the ball for over 2/3 of the game. And the biggest thing that hurt the Dolphins is that the fact that Teron Armstead was injured. And I think that anytime you have an offensive lineman that's injured, like when you had Darisaw that was injured, that was big against the Cowboys.
Yep.
A lot of people don't talk about that. And they're like, oh, the Dolphins, fake news. No, offensive lineman plays a big role in this. Nick Bosa saw met with Tua Tagovailoa with sacks a lot during this game. They and the 49ers pass defense, man, they're so good. They had a defensive touchdown in this game, so that definitely made Tua uncomfortable. He had to kind of evade the pocket, and he was throwing interceptions while on the run, so wasn't as accurate as he needed to be to allow them to win the game. All in all, I mean, the 49ers team, even with Brock Purdy or not, I think they're still a threat. And they move on to 8-4. Miami is also going to be 8-4 on to the season.
Yeah, I mean, We talked about this on the preview episode. A lot of storylines, right? I mean, Kyle Shanahan, Mike McDaniel, like,
Yeah.
mentor, young grasshopper, or whatever, mentee. And then we talked. I had talked about it when I had asked you guys, would you guys start Tua against San Francisco or Trevor Lawrence against Detroit? And I ended up starting Trevor Lawrence against Detroit. And Lawrence
Oh,
didn't have a
no.
great game, but he actually did end up outperforming Tua.
Yeah.
So
Huh.
Tua had like 13 or 14 fantasy points. I think Lawrence had like 16. So Lawrence ended up doing better. But the key that you mentioned that I had already thought about was probably going to be the reason was the whole Armstead injury, right? Bosa's back, your left tackle's hurt. I mean, again, Tua is an accuracy guy, right? So a lot of the plays have to form for him to put the ball where it needs to be, and he puts the ball there really well. But when the plays are not formulating because he's getting pressure and he's got to scramble, then it's not the same situation. I mean, you saw that 2 interceptions and a fumble might have been one of his tougher games since he's been on this historic, like really, really good run this season. So again, these are types of quarterbacks that, they play great when clean pocket, the pressure's not there, but when the pressure's there, it's a whole different story. So definitely something intriguing to watch out for. Will, opposing defenses that are playing the Dolphins moving forward start throwing more blitzes and pressures towards Tua's way? And that's where Mike McDaniel, the offensive wizard, is just going to have to adjust. And, the one thing that I didn't want Mike McDaniel to take away from Kyle Shanahan is the random usage of running backs. Just when we think Wilson's going to be like the starter, he's getting like bell cow work. All of a sudden, Mostert out carries him. So again, I guess he took that from Shanahan as well, amongst all the other crap.
Right.
Another game that, looking back, probably was the game of the week. The Chiefs at the Bengals. Chiefs on the road favored by 2 points, over under sitting at 53 points. The Bengals and Joe Burrow pulled this one away late, 27-24 final. Cincinnati 2-point dogs cover the spread under 53 cashes. The Chiefs dropped to 9-3. Cincinnati is now 8-4. Joe Burrow is 3-0 against Kansas City, man. Every team has their Achilles heel. Every team has this like, oh, why is it that, we can't beat this team? And are the Bengals, is Joe Burrow that team for the Chiefs and for Patty Mahomes? It's looking like it. 3-0 against Kansas City. And, that's obviously no short of an amazing feat because Kansas City has been unstoppable. Burrow, 286 through the air, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. But let's talk a little bit about the fact that all of a sudden Joe Burrow wants to run the football. All of a sudden, Joe Burrow wants to use his legs. 11 carries, 46 yards, and a touchdown. I mean, that just adds a whole another element to Joe Burrow's fantasy status that takes him from like top 5 to like possibly top 1, right? Because his passing numbers are already through the roof. And now if he starts using his legs, the last 2 weeks, he's had 20 carries, Shovit. 2 weeks, 20 combined carries for your quarterback, for Joe Burrow, who barely runs the football. 20 carries, 78 yards, and a touchdown on the ground the last 2 weeks. So again, that's something to watch out for. It's only a 2-game sample size. He's only running like 4 or 5 times a game at most over the first like 14 or 12 weeks. But again, that if this is a trend, if this is truly a way to unlock the next level of this offense, then holy cow, this offense can be so, so much scarier. Samaje Perine got the start in the absence of Mixon, and let's just go out and say it. Samaje Perine is better than Joe Mixon. 21 carries, 106 yards, 6 catches, 49 yards. The dude is way better as a pass catcher. He runs harder. His stiff arms are like Najee Harris-esque, right? This dude is strong as shit. So I don't really know why he's not the starter. I think he should be. If anything, if Mixon comes back, they should be really, really spreading the love and splitting the work because Perine has deserved it after how well he's played in Mixon's absence. And another storyline, Jamar Chase is back. I was hesitant. I did start him, but I was really worried because I was like, man, this is really quick for him to come back off the IR. Like I traded for him and people traded him away like he was going to be out for season. So I was skeptical. I did still end up starting him, but 7 catches, 97 yards, you gladly take in his first game back for Jamar Chase. That does obviously seep into the other guys' production. T. Higgins, 3 for 35, did find the end zone though. And I still think Higgins is going to be a great factor even with Chase back. Tyler Boyd, 4 for 60, and then Hayden Hurst left the game with an injury. So that is something to watch out for, again, as tight ends are a turnstile. On the Chiefs side, Patty Mahomes had a very, very human game. 223 through the air, 1 touchdown, no interceptions. Did also run the ball twice for 9 yards and scrambled one into the end zone. And then on the other side, Isaiah Pacheco, 14 carries, 66 yards, and a rushing touchdown, 2 catches, 16 yards. And Jerick McKinnon also had 8 rushes for 51 yards, caught 2 balls for 9 yards, and caught a touchdown as well. And again, the Bengals, the way to beat the Chiefs is to contain the one guy that seemingly can't be contained, but the Bengals did it. Travis Kelce was like a disappearing act for most of this game, man. Only 4 catches on 56 yards on 6 targets. I'd have to go back through his game log and see the last time this man only got 6 targets, because I'm pretty sure this is like the only time this year that he's had this little amount of targets. So whatever their defense is doing, it's absolutely working. I mean, he had to throw bombs to MVS, who had 2 catches for 71 yards, but all in all, this was such a well played, like just a complete performance from the Bengals. Their offense did everything. The P. Ryan filled in nicely. Chase came back and played well. Burrow started using his legs. And then, not to mention, the defense shut down the biggest weapon in maybe all of the NFL in Travis Kelce. So I am very, very impressed with the Bengals. I'm very, very impressed with Joe Burrow. And, I think this really just elevates the Bengals back to that. Okay, so last year was not a fluke. They weren't just on an incredible run. The start of this year was a little bit of a fluke. They were getting people back and healthy and figuring shit out. And now the Bengals are a force to be reckoned with in the AFC.
Absolutely. What a perfect timing too, right when, you got 5 more games until playoff starts and you're ready to make that push, and you can now, potentially get the number 1, home field advantage if you keep winning, and the Chiefs
Yep.
have to lose as well, but perfect time for Chase to come back and the Bengals to start rolling, like we were used to last year.
Yep.
All right, the next game, showdown of the AFC West, the LA Chargers at Las Vegas to face the Raiders. This was a even. Vegas had it as the even line, and the over under was 50.5. The under hit with the final score at 20-27. A fun game to watch for fantasy wise. Austin Eckler didn't do as well as you would like him to do, though. 10 carries, 35 yards, 10.7 fantasy points, which is kind of low for Eckler. He did also have a fumble that ruined, that lowered his points a little bit as well. Justin Herbert, a lot of yards, 335 yards, 1 touchdown, ends with 18.1 fantasy points. But just 1 touchdown, so that kind of ruined that for him. But 18, you'll take that. Keenan Allen, he's back, 6 catches on 14 targets, 88 yards, 1 touchdown. One of the touchdowns came late in the fourth quarter, that deep bomb.
Unreal catch.
That was amazing, and I think Justin Herbert was kind of on the run and threw it to Keenan Allen, and that was an amazing play to watch to keep them competitive and close in the game. And Gerald Everett, 5 receptions, 6 targets on 80 yards. Solid performance from the tight end there. I think that's like 10.5 points. You'll take that from your tight end. Las Vegas, the Raiders, Devontae Adams had 8 receptions for 177 yards, 2 touchdowns. One of them was a flea flicker, which was, he just beat the defender. There was no way that defender was getting anywhere near him. And Josh Jacobs continues to do Josh Jacobs things. 26 attempts, 144 yards, and 1 touchdown. So solid game for fantasy-wise on the Raiders side. Basically, this was a very interesting game. But Chargers, when it came down to push come to shove, and you have to move the chains to get the touchdown, like it was 20-27. They weren't able to do that. They weren't able to capitalize, and the Raiders, with Derek Carr kind of being efficient and utilizing Devontae Adams, were able to move the chains and get the touchdowns that they needed to score. And all in all, that's why they ended up winning this game. Raiders are now going to be 5-7, and the Chargers dropped to 6-6 on the season.
Yeah, disappointing loss for the Chargers, man. I mean, we've been talking about the Raiders, and I know they've been playing better football. The Raiders difference really is last year they could not run the football to save their lives, right? So Derek Carr was having to basically bail them out, and all of a sudden Josh Jacobs has found new life. The offensive line's blocking better, and so that's taking so much pressure off of Derek Carr, and obviously it helps having Devontae Adams, right? So I think 2 big keys is they're running the football better, and they have a star wide receiver, so it is a little bit of a different team. But I still, if the Chargers are going to be taken seriously, then they have to win these types of football games, and they just seem to be falling short. And I don't want to put the blame on Herbert. I know he does a lot with very little. Offensive line's been bad, receiving core has been injured in and out, but he's throwing for a lot of yards, but a lot of these third downs that you expect them to convert, they're just not. They're stalling, they're having to punt, and so the offense just doesn't seem in sync. And it was really, really frustrating to watch because I expected the Chargers offense to be clicking against this Vegas defense. So I don't really know what to make of the Chargers. It's like deja vu where it's the quarterback is the only guy and everybody else is just whatever. And it's just like Phillip Rivers all over again, So I don't think Justin Herbert wants to be sitting here for 15 years and barely making the playoffs a couple of times and never sniffing a Super Bowl. So I think the Chargers need to make some changes fast. And this team is so much better than the output that they're putting on the field, in my opinion. And I know injuries, they're decimated, etc. But injuries happen. It's the NFL. You got to kind of adjust. Sunday night football took us to Jerry's world, where the Cowboys basically blew the Colts out of the water. 54-19 was the final score. Cowboys covered the whopping 10.5-point spread. They hit the over by themselves, 43.5. So Dallas is now 9-3. The Colts dropped to 4-8-1. This was a game of 3 quarters and 1 quarter. Coming into the fourth quarter, the score of the game was 21-19. The Cowboys were up. The Cowboys scored 33 fourth quarter points. Matt Ryan, I'm sorry, dude. You just need to retire. Like, I think it's it. Like, just call it quits. You're just not the same. 233 yards passing, 2 touchdowns. He had 3 interceptions, 1 fumble lost. He was sacked 3 times. Granted, he's not really getting much help. Jonathan Taylor, mediocre day, 21 carries, 82 yards, 3 catches, 21 yards. Receiving core, we talked about it. Who's going to be the guy? It's still such a Russian roulette. Alec Pierce, 4 for 86 and a touchdown. Paris Campbell, 4 for 43. MPJ, the guy who had been the guy, 2 catches, 16 yards. So pretty disappointing performance for him. But the offense, their offense sucks. Matt Ryan is not the answer. The offensive line can't block. Dallas had their way. 33 fourth quarter points. The last 5 Colts possessions, fumble, interception, fumble, and end of game. So, dude, it's almost like Matt Ryan had Dallas Cowboys defense, and he was like, you know what? We're not going to win this game. So I'm just going to go out and just play as bad as I possibly can the last 4 possessions because we have no chance to win and I need some fantasy points. So it almost seemed like it was scripted how bad Matt Ryan was and how much he was just turning the ball over. So, again, if you had the Cowboys defense, you feasted. Dak 170 through the air, not amazing yards, but 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. Tony Pollard, I benched him. Didn't matter. I still won, but I'm sad I benched him. 12 carries, 91 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 catches, 15 yards. Zeke also had a nice game, 17 for 77 and a touchdown, 3 catches, 14 yards. CeeDee Lamb has solidified himself as a wide receiver 1. He's having a fantastic year, 5 for 71 and a touchdown. Michael Gallup is back, catches 4 balls for 23 yards, but 2 of them go for touchdowns. And Dalton Schultz, 2 for 33. I did take Schultz as an anytime touchdown in this game, so I thought he was going to score. And it's nice to see that there were 2 different times where they had red zone plays designed for him, where he's basically like lining up in the slot and it's a seam and you're throwing it over the linebacker. And they attempted that 2 different times. So it's still nice to see, if you're a Schultz owner, which you are, that they look for him in the red zone. I just wish, again, the ball is getting to him, but again, it's a tight end position. You'll take it any day if he's getting targets in the end zone. But this was a mismatch. This was David versus Goliath. We talked about this on the preview episode. There's literally no chance in hell the Colts are going to stick with this Cowboys pass rush unless Jonathan Taylor has a freakishly good game, which he didn't. It was very mediocre. So no chance. They had absolutely no chance. Cowboys were a whopping 10.5-point favorites, and they covered that with absolute ease. So that tells you everything you need to know. Dallas now 9-3. That Dallas against Philly game on Christmas Eve, man, I am circling my calendar because that is going to be one to watch.
I know I might end up going to that game. That's like down the street from me, and
dude, yes,
I'm thinking like that's going to be a fun game.
If I'm you, I'm going. Get there.
Yeah. All right, from Sunday Night Football, we go on to Monday Night Football, where New Orleans Saints played the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Saints, where the Buccaneers were favored by 3.5 points. That they didn't cover that spread. The over/under was at 40.5. The under hit. Final score 16-17 points. The Buccaneers win this game. Surprisingly, I did not think that was going to happen while watching the game. Fantasy wise, on the Saints side, the best player on the Saints this week was Taysom Hill. 2 receptions, 35 yards, 1 touchdown, 3 carries, 10 rushing yards, and he also had one pass completion for 21 yards. So he had, I guess, a trifecta, I guess, if you want to say, of being everywhere. Alvin Kamara, his role is kind of declining. I kept seeing Mark Ingram out there just getting more and more reps. And Alvin Kamara, when he was there, he was averaging like 2 yards per carry. Alvin Kamara, I think it's so tough to gauge him. He's taking a back seat, and maybe it's a suspension. Maybe they're just gonna, not even start, like, keep him on to the next year or something with the way Mark Ingram is getting utilized. Mark Ingram did get hurt as well. So, if you're a Kamara owner, I really don't know what you want to do with that situation. I think we're going to have to look at the matchup next week to figure that out, but not a disappointing performance by Kamara. On the Bucs side, Rachaad White, versus Leonard Fournette, right? 9 carries for Rachaad White on 28 yards, 6 receptions, 41 yards. He does see gets to the end zone late in the fourth quarter, gets a receiving touchdown. Fournette, 10 attempts, 49 yards, 6 receptions, 32 yards, and ends with 11.1 fantasy points. So Rachaad White, he had a fumble in the game, and he wasn't playing, so Fournette was out. Fournette was in more often, so I think Fournette benefited from the fact that Rachaad White had that fumble. And I didn't even think Fournette was going to start until like an hour before the game, and I was
Very
trying to
late. Yeah.
very late, and I was trying to figure out whether I should start Fournette or Olave. I went with Olave, even though Olave didn't get. He only had 8.5 fantasy points. The thing with Olave was that you saw the utilization, you saw them throwing the ball to him. He dropped he dropped a big play, but then there were times where you thought Olave should be in and he wasn't in. So it was just kind of mismanagement and bad luck for Olave owners because only 8.5 points, right? So not the best. But going back to the Buccaneers, Kate Otten, 6 reception, 10 targets, 28 yards, 1 touchdown. Apparently, Cameron Brate had an illness that I found out late as well. And so Kate Otten benefits from that. Chris Godwin, 8 reception, 13 targets, 63 yards. Volume's the name of the game. And so he got the receptions. And Mike Evans, 4 for 4, 59 yards. They tried to get him to get those deep bombs to him, but when they did, it was like a pass interference or just they weren't connect. Brady wasn't connecting with Mike Evans, so I think that hurt Evans' performance fantasy wise. Game script wise. Also back to Rachaad White versus Leonard Fournette. Moving forward, I think Rachaad White is gonna continue being a guy that's a running back one. Even though Fournette was there, on this, you're looking at fantasy points, he's got 11 points. That's okay, right? No, it's not okay. Rachaad White is probably gonna be the guy that's gonna be the RB1 there, even though Fournette will come in every now and then. So the game script, I think that 3 minutes remaining in the game, the Saints were up. What was it? 16 to
16 to
3.
3.
They were up by 13 points, and honestly, they just lost it. Right? There was a play where Mark Ingram runs 9 yards, and instead of going to getting a first down, he goes straight out of bounds. I was watching that thinking, what are you doing, Mark Ingram? And it's almost like the coaches are like, hey, let's go out of bounds. Like we got to get the. They're not even getting draft picks. They just I don't know what happened there. It just lost it. And then there were other plays where Mike Evans, that pass interference, single coverage on Mike Evans, when you've been playing back, 2 safeties back the whole time. I don't know what they were thinking with that play, and it caused a pass interference, and they go out and score. The Buccaneers score on the next play, and it was just bad mismanagement in the fourth quarter with 3 minutes remaining. You either you either you commit to the run game or you commit to the passing game, and I thought that they didn't run the ball to keep the clock going. They tried a play action call, got sacked, and then the next play they tried to throw it to Taysom Hill for 20 yards downfield, and if he doesn't catch that, the time stops. And so why don't you just call a check down play or something to be able to keep the time going? And they didn't do that, and so they lost the ball. They lost the game. And yes, Tom Brady is GOAT. To be able to come back and manage the game, to feed those slants that they kept feeding and Godwin, and allowing them to get closer and closer, and finally a touchdown to Otten and a touchdown to White. That all helped out Tom. That worked in the favor of the Buccaneers. But for me, I think the Saints lost this one. But good for the Buccaneers. They're still top of this division at 6-6. New Orleans goes down to 4-9.
Yeah, this to me is the difference between having Sean Payton as your head coach and having Dennis Allen as your head coach, right? I mean, those are some of the X's and O's stuff that like Sean Payton would never. He would never. And I mean, the Mark Ingram thing was so bad he had to come out and tweet and publicly apologize for his stupidity. Like if you dude, like watch that replay over and over and over again. Mark Ingram can do like 4 different things there, right? And he chose to do the worst thing you could do. He could have easily gotten the first down and still gone out of bounds, which you shouldn't go out of bounds, but the clock still starts under 4 minutes in the fourth quarter, right? So it doesn't matter. The clock was still going to tick. So going out of bounds is not the worst thing, but the fact that he just runs straight out of bounds a yard short. So like he could have ran for a first down, stayed in bounds, ran for a first down, gone out of bounds. There's so many things he could have done there, and he decides to just go out of bounds a yard short, and that's the difference in the game. I mean, it's incredible how something like that in the heat of the moment, one play, you're just like, okay, whatever. I'm not trying to think so intricately that every play I need to run in my head to understand what the possible outcomes and scenarios are, but he needed to. That was a very, very crucial situation, and he didn't. He just kind of ran the ball and ran out of bounds. So I don't know, man. It is. The Alvin Kamara situation was weird too. I know I had his over on catches, so I was watching like a lot of dump off possibilities. And what I noticed is Andy Dalton loves to try to push the ball downfield, right? He's still the red rifle, and he still, I think, believes that he's a starting quarterback in this NFL. So he always comes out with a lot to prove. So less dump offs and more pushing the ball downfield. That's kind of what he tries to do. And that is what hurts Alvin Kamara. Alvin Kamara is a guy that, is a CMC type where his rushing may not be incredible all the time, but he's going to catch 6 to 9 passes. And if he's not doing that, and they're not running the ball efficiently, then he almost becomes useless. And so I also wonder if like the fumble from last week played into him having a little bit of a declining role. That's something I wanted to talk to Shishot more about as a Kamara owner. Like, what are you seeing? Like, why is this transpiring the way it is? And so we'll have to talk more about that with him next week or on the preview episode. But yeah, that is definitely an anomaly. And if you're a Kamara owner and you're heading into the playoffs, like that's not the best running back that you probably want on your roster. You don't feel comfortable at all.
The thing is, like, with the whole Mark Ingram and Kamara thing, like, Mark Ingram got hurt and he hurt his knee, and he got pushed down really hard to like where he looked like, oh, that looks like a big problem for, like, and when a player like that gets down, you don't think that he should continue running the ball. Like, Alvin Kamara
Mm-hmm.
should have been there. Ingram should have never been had that opportunity to go
Mm-hmm.
out before he gets that first
Yep.
down. So it's like when you see things like that, like my assumption is like they're ready to move on from this whole Kamara and this whole suspension, all this things that has happened this year and in the offseason. And so maybe that's what it is. But yeah, it's just a weird situation there.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, again, Kamara is not the guy you probably want right now if you're heading into the playoffs because you really don't know what you're going to get from him.
Yeah.
That is it for the rundown show of it. Let's hand out some awards. I have a foreshadowing that you're going to have to do a lot of audibling for this week as well. So I'm going to kick us off with my first award, show of it. My first award is What Can Brown Do For You? Give me
You
your
know,
best guess.
I think I know what this is, and I don't think let me ask you this question: is
Yep.
it more than one player?
100%.
It's literally all the Browns, isn't it? It's all the Browns.
What can Brown do for you? If you had a Brown on your team this week, you were thriving. AJ Brown had an unbelievable week. I think what did he have? Hold on, let me just pull this. Let me just pull all these up real quick while I have you. AJ Brown had 8 catches, 119 yards, and 2 touchdowns, right? That's what Brown can do for you. Amon-Ra St. Brown had 11 catches, 114 yards, and 2 touchdowns. That's what Brown can do for you. Well, what can the Browns do for you? The Browns defense had 31
31.
fantasy points, 3 defensive touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 2 fumbles recovered, only 12 points allowed. That is what Brown can do for you. All the Browns, every Brown had a fantastic week. So my award goes to AJ Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and the Cleveland Browns defense.
And your 3 favorite brownies right here on this
Oh,
podcast.
yeah,
What would
exactly.
you give?
Brownie's giving out brownie points, man. I mean, it's just all coming full circle. It's all coming full circle.
I love it. I love it. All right. So my award is "They Can't Hold Me, Godly" award.
When I saw that, at first I thought you were going to give it to Amon-Ra St. Brown, but I'm assuming it's not because you didn't audible. And
I
it's not
didn't.
AJ Brown because you didn't audible. So is it Devontae Adams?
It's Devontae Adams. Well done. 8 receptions on 12 targets, 177 yards, 2 touchdowns, finishes the game with 33.7 points. They can't hold him. No one can hold him. And he had a stellar performance. So he gets the Randy Moss / They Can't Hold Me Godly award.
As much as I love Justin Jefferson and, I'm like, oh, 1 of 1, blah, blah, blah. Like, I think until Adams tells us he's not the best receiver in the league, he's the best receiver in the league in my opinion. Like, he's just unbelievable. Like, he like, there's just, you're you're never going to see Devontae Adams drop a pass. I can't even tell you a time I've seen Devontae Adams drop a pass. It's like one of those things where, like, if it happens, you're like, whoa. And I don't know, man. Like, he just makes every play. Like, he's always there. He's always reliable. He's not
Mhm.
the fastest guy on the block, but he's always getting open. How is he open like 40 yards of separation when he's not even like a fast guy? Like, that is how good his route running is. It's just unbelievable. This guy, man. Like,
And he
and
almost
I'm
had that
thriving with,
yeah. No,
go
and he
ahead.
almost had that sick one-hand catch too, but
Yes.
he couldn't get
Yes.
the feet in, but, I mean, if he had that he caught that, that would've been
Dude, that
carried.
and it was so, like, nonchalant how he did it too, and I'm like, "Okay, bro, like, chill. Now you're just showing off." Unbelievable. Definitely. That's a great award. My game ball this week goes to cool Joe Burrow. We already talked about him. 30 fantasy points. He's 3-0 against the Chiefs. And this performance officially puts this guy in MVP talk. So, we always talk about Joe Burrow, no offensive line. He's not the best scrambler. He's a good pocket passer. Is he in a good situation? Does he have a lot of great weapons? Yes, yes, and all that. But this offense would be nothing without Joe Burrow. He is the reason this offense is what it is. And now Jamar Chase is back and healthy, and they are just cooking at the right time. Joe Burrow, the future is bright. Watch out for the Bengals to make another run to the Super Bowl. He gets my game ball this week.
Awesome. All right. And I do have to make an audible here. I had the Cleveland Browns, but the Browns have already been taken off the board. So my game ball is gonna go to CMC. Had a solid game this week. 66 yards rushing, but he did get a receiving touchdown. I had 8 catches and 80 yards as well. So when his team needed him, Garoppolo is out. He steps up and is able to help his team win the game. So he gets a game ball for me.
Yeah, great game ball because they're going to have to rely on him even more now, especially if it's Purdy. Purdy's going to be dumping the ball up to CMC. You better bet your ass he is. So CMC, especially with Elijah Mitchell on the IR, I mean, it's like the opposite of Alvin Kamara situation, right? Like everything is coming together for a CMC owner. Nothing is coming together for an Alvin Kamara owner right now. That's it. That is the award show of it. Let's end the episode real quick. Preview Thursday Night Football. We've already talked about these two teams, so it's going to feel like rinse and repeat. The Raiders are traveling to LA to take on the Rams. Raiders favored on the road by 6 points, over under 44. Three questions or a couple questions I want to ask you. Las Vegas just coming off a big victory against the Chargers. Are they due for a letdown? Is this the same Vegas team where, they just pick up a pretty nice victory? Can they pick up two in a row? Oh, they're taking on the Rams, who just pick up Baker Mayfield. This is the perfect letdown spot for the Raiders. Tell me I'm wrong.
I think you're wrong. I think the Raiders are explosive on offense, and I think that they have enough abilities. And I don't think that the Rams they're just ready to pack the bags. Like, what are they playing for? Absolutely nothing. And with Devonta Adams, Josh Jacobs, they're really rolling. And so I think that they are not due for a letdown here.
You don't think if Baker plays, he's going to resurge these Rams and make them relevant?
Absolutely not. We've seen enough of Baker. We've seen enough. You mentioned it earlier. We've seen him from the Browns, and he wasn't shit. We saw him at the Panthers, and he ain't shit. So like, why does what Sean McVay is gonna turn Baker Mayfield around or something? Like
He took Jared Goff to the Super Bowl. He took Jared Goff to the Super Bowl.
with what receivers? Like
uh,
and which offensive line? I just don't think if Baker plays, I just don't think he'll help them win the game or anything like that.
the line, if like the Rams are exactly the Rams, and obviously the Seattle run defense was awful, that's why the Rams stayed close. The Raiders should win this game by more than 6 points, right? Like if the Raiders offense is truly clicking, Adams can't be stopped, Jacobs is running all over the field, and the Raiders defensive line is finally generating some pass rush with Crosby and Jones. Like, don't you think the Raiders should beat the Rams, this current Rams team, by more than 6 points?
Absolutely, yeah.
I kind of like the Vegas -6 now. I've talked myself into it.
Oh yeah, man. 6 points is
Ju-
also yeah. It's one of those things like I'm not confident about. I'm confident about the win, so I'm
yeah.
confident about like a 31-20. No, not even. Man, I
It's the
just
Raiders. Nothing. You can't be confident about anything because anything can happen, man.
yeah,
Anything can happen. But I would maybe you tease down the Raiders,
yeah.
6 point teaser, so you get them as a pick 'em, and then you take the over at like 38.
Oh, I
Then
love
the
that.
Raiders, or maybe take the under at 50 because the Rams probably aren't going to score a bunch, So either way, I kind of like that teaser. So there you go. That's a bet for Thursday Night Football. Anything else you want to talk about in this Thursday Night Football matchup?
No, I mean Akers. I think that you have on here Cam Akers. Definitely not Kyron Williams.
No.
Cam Akers. Whether or not you start him, I think that he can be considered as a start. Maybe. I think it depends on what your team looks like. In that.
Yeah, and he's such a shitty player, like what he's can possibly do, which is nothing, that it's the worst where you see that guy in your lineup on Thursday night and Thursday night football's over and he's gotten you like a measly 2 or 3 points. And it's such a demoralizing way to head into the weekend where you've already
Right.
had a guy play and he did so bad. So yeah, it's a very, very sticky start, but that's the only guy on that side that you're even entertaining starting. Maybe Matt Gay, the kicker, but I would say Cam Akers or nobody. And then on the Raiders side, obviously Jacobs, obviously Adams. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe Mac Hollins if you're desperate. I had Foster Moreau starting, but he had like one nice catch. They do target him a couple times, but he also looked like he got concussed. Like he got hit in the head pretty hard. So I don't really know what to make of that. But I think comfortably Jacobs and Adams. And then if you're really desperate, you're starting Akers on the other end.
Yep.
That is the show. That is the episode. Thank you guys so much for sticking with us for another long-winded episode. Week 13 is officially in the works. So again, NFL season rapidly passing. Next week, when we're previewing week 14, that is the final week for our fantasy before playoffs start. So a lot of fantasy implications. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I'm Sweet Card, that's Showbit. We're the only playbook. We will see you on Friday.